why I call myself a deprescriber. That's because this has now become the official term. It's the process you're going through coming off drugs that have been described. But where I face the challenge is I find taking people off psychotropic totally is a multidisciplinary approach. And medicine is divided up into special silos of information. So you get passed from one specialist to the other. I mean, psychiatrists are not trained in diet or exercise. And people's lives are devastated on these drugs. They financially they have a problem. So what I've done is qualified myself in various aspects. Now I'm an executive coach.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Carnivore Evolution. I'm Victoria Olson. We have our co-hosts Nancy Brown and Mark Ennis with us today, and our special guest is Erik Peers from South Africa, who uses a ketogenic diet in his therapeutic practice of deprescribing medications for patients. Hello, Erik, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Victoria. So glad to be here.
We're so happy you are here. Yes, Erik, we'd like to hear from you. We want to hear your whole story, starting with how you developed your approach using a ketogenic diet and what your therapy is all about.
Well, first of all, my carnivore credentials. I've been keto 11 years now, and the last 8 pure carnivore. I took part in one of Sean Baker's first study. As we know, it doesn't exactly suit pharma to conduct a study showing that we're actually better off drug-free.
Yes.
So we decided worldwide, there were over 400 of us, and we all got together, and for 90 days, we mapped out the most amazing things that I never knew one could measure on a study. I don't know if you know, but I never knew there's such a thing as a poop scale.
No, really? I think so. I think I might have known that. How would you score?
You've got to use a torch because it's all dark in there. But I mean, it's very important. Digestion is important. And one of the myths about carnivore is that it will stop you up, which is absolutely not true. I find motility works absolutely better. And in fact, I don't even think about it. It must be like 30 seconds a day. I think about it, and then it disappears from my mind, not to return another 24 hours later. Whereas if you're on lots of plants, of course, it's got a lot of fiber. You can't digest it, so it's
yes.
So that is one of the first things we measured. Then we also measured erectile strength as a marker of cardiovascular health. And the women had to measure menstrual flow. So we really got scientific about it. And I was measuring ketones in the morning, blood glucose, insulin, and all these markers as we went through the study. And the results were, as we hoped, absolutely consistent. We all then remarked, and I hadn't been full carnivore before, but I've never felt better. And what is very interesting is when I went keto, it was a vast improvement. I mean, keto is amazing. But I still had sore joints. I would wake up in the morning and I couldn't close my hands. So everything else was much better. My weight rectified, my energy, my skin tone, but my joints were still sore. And when I cut the plants, boom, no more sore joints. My hands were perfect. Yeah, absolutely wonderful. So our plants time trying to kill us, as Dr. Anthony Chatty will tell you. Yes, I think they are. I think it's oxalates that get into the joints, but I'm not sure why. What I know is you don't eat the plants, you don't have sore joints, which makes waking up in the morning feel much, much better. But how did I come to use this as a therapeutical mode in my practice? There, I've got to go back 30 years to when the mother of my young son was then having some difficulties. So we took her to hospital and she was admitted. And then after a week, a psychiatrist phoned me, wanted me to come see her. And I came in, of course, I was very concerned, and I spoke to her. And we developed a trusting relationship in helping dealing with my partner at the time. And then one day, the psychiatrist says to me, hands out these tablets and says, take these. So I said, but there's nothing wrong with me. And she said, no, you're going through stress. You may not know it yet, but you're depressed. So trust me, I'm a doctor. So I did. And there I descended into 10 years of hell. Absolutely. But I was first subject to medical spellbinding because I didn't know what the problem was the drugs I was taking. I didn't know that at all. I was first on an SSRI. Then I was traveling internationally in my IT business and changing time zones and having the medications at a different time as I got very confused, which is not very good for handling customers and managers, so on a different continent. So I decided, that's it, I stopped the drug. And then I felt wonderful for 6 weeks. And then I dumped into a horrendous deep depression. At the time, I went back to the psychiatrist and she shouted at me and said, how can you do this without telling me? This is the depression returning now that you didn't know you had. And I didn't know it was actually a withdrawal symptom from the drug, which is withdrawal can take place a long time after you stop taking. It doesn't necessarily happen the very next day. So that is something I hadn't realized then. So she then put me on something stronger called an SNRI. And I went a year on that. And then I also thought, no, this is messing up my sex life. I said to her, I used to be happy an hour a day, and now you've taken that away from me. So again, the same cycle, felt better. Then after 6 weeks again, even worse. And then I went back to her again, and then she put me on an MAOI, which is even stronger. So I stayed on that, thinking, well, there's something wrong with me. I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. I've got a shortage of serotonin, and so on, and life carried on. But the adverse effects of the drugs were terrible. And this is before the days before I discovered keto. So what happened then is my son, I was then a single parent. My son's best friend at school, his mother sat me down one day and she said she was at university in Poland with a psychiatrist. And she said she knows a psychiatrist who's on like 3, 4, 5 drugs of her own. And that it's the drug that's causing my problems. And this was eye-opening to me. It never occurred to me that the very drug that was meant to help me was actually causing the issues. So I thought, okay, I better cut it. But this time I'm only going to cut 50%, take it slowly. As people are often advised, cut in half again. So I cut in half, but that disturbed my balance. And I was doing judo at the school with my elder children. And it so happened my son threw me and he broke my ankle. I shouldn't have been training that day at all. But you don't realize the effect the drug's having on you. And previous to that, in fact, 2 years previous to that, I was at the school, first judo lesson ever in my life, and I'm in my 40s now. And the sensei says, fine, walk on your hands. And I'd always been too scared to do this because, you might fall, you might hurt yourself. And I thought, no, don't be a sissy, do this. And I went up on my hands because one of the things these drugs do is they take your fear away, so that you no longer have healthy fears. So I was no longer scared of doing it. I crashed down, broke my collarbone. Then when my ankle broke, I had an operation, and I said to the anesthetist, I said, but won't your anesthetics interfere with this drug I'm taking? He goes, no, don't worry, no problem. And after the operation, I was in a terrible, terrible depression. So I had to go back onto the drug again. It's the only way to solve it. But in the process, I got fired because bosses don't like depressed employees. And so now I was with a broken leg, without work and still being a single parent. And so life went on these drugs. And then I became aware of what the drugs did to me. In those days, we didn't have social media with all the information. I couldn't access medical studies, which I now can. In those days, you need to be a doctor and go to a medical library. But this is all opened up, and I can see any medical study in the world, which is fantastic. So life carried on. And then I thought, well, I must come off. And by now, it had been 9 years on the drugs. So I worked out what is the absolute minimum I could cut. And I worked at that I could cut 1/28th of a daily dose. So that's like 4%. So I cut 4% and I would get withdrawal symptoms that would last
Nice.
a week. I'd hold for a week and then went away, and then I'd cut again. And I did that for 56 weeks. And that is the correct way to come off. Now we have wonderful researchers
goodness.
like Dr. Mark Horowitz, who published a book called the Maudsley Deprescribing Guidelines. We have Professor Joanna Moncrief, who's totally blown open the serotonin myth. No, we don't have a chemical imbalance. And so then I was drug-free, which was wonderful. I could exercise properly. Life was better. Life was a lot better. However, I had two, we call it protracted withdrawal, two effects of the drug that stayed with me. And the one was an incredible sensitivity to sucrose, to sugar. If I had a grain of sugar, I immediately had a hypoglycemic attack with the shakes and fainting, and it was quite dramatic and very embarrassing because you're in a restaurant and you don't know they added a bit of sugar to the meal, and the next thing I'm lying on the floor shaking, everybody's fussing around you, and it's this whole problem.
Oh my gosh.
So I went zero sugar. This is before I knew about keto, but I was zero sugar. And because I was zero sugar, I was in effect eating a ketogenic diet. And that stayed with me for some 6-7 years. And before I willed myself out of that, and it stopped. But the other side effect that stayed is about one day a week I would become depressed, so that I couldn't work. That sort of level depression. And I then went keto to lose weight, and I couldn't believe it. The next week, that depression disappeared and is gone. For 21 years, it's never come back, never been depressed a day. So that is when I first became aware of the psychological effects of keto and the healing effects. And I was, at the time I was staying, there was a 20-year-old man who was staying with me, who was morbidly obese. And I said, well, do this diet with me. And he did. And he lost 50 kilograms. That's 110 pounds in 5 months.
In 5 months?
Absolutely amazing. No dieting, nothing. Just tell him, if you have a hamburger, don't eat the bun, eat the patty. If you have steak and chips, don't eat the chips, eat the steak. Have 2 steaks if you want. And this is what he did. But what I noticed is he was bipolar. He was diagnosed bipolar. He was on bipolar meds. And then through the diet, his bipolar went away. And I was living with him, so I could see this. And he became a pleasure to be with, his whole interaction with me. And so I then, way back then, I think was one of the first to say, aha, metabolic psychiatry is the key. What you eat gives you brain energy. Now, since then, Dr. Chris Palmer of Harvard has written a book called Brain Energy. And it says how the mitochondria are powered. So there is way more to an essential diet than just say, I've lost those pounds and I feel a bit better, Or even ladies going through menopause, I find that if they go carnivore, the hot flushes decrease. And menopause becomes much better, because insulin is a hormone. And if your insulin spikes, there's a domino effect on other hormones. And so they get out of whack, and the testosterone gets out of whack. And this is where ladies develop PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so taking this onto the psychology, because my background is psychology, I have a degree in psychology, I decided that I want to coach people to do this. So I attended, there's an educational institute founded by Professor Tim Noakes. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's one of our main carnivores. And then he's told me personally that if he had known at the time, he wouldn't even have written a book about keto. He would have written about carnivore, because he says it's so way better. But he said when he started it, he couldn't imagine a meal without onions. I mean, how can you not have onions in a meal? And so he himself has gone that journey. And unfortunately, I know personally, check things with him. So he started keto off in South Africa. And there's a massive movement with that. We have a World Nutrition Summit every year. Pleased to say I'll be speaking at this one in October. Half the guests are normally from all over the world where we gather. It's similar to low-carb USA or,
Down under. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And we get the great people. Somebody you might know is Dr. Jason Fung. I met him 11 years ago at the first conference, the first keto conference. So before he was famous, he wrote the book, The Obesity Code.
Could you repeat his name? Who was that?
Jason Fung. Jason Fung. He's in Canada.
Oh, Fung.
Or Fung, okay.
Yeah.
Funny,
I'm American.
And yes, I can say I knew him before he was famous, and it's my thing. I can show a photo of us together. So it was all very exciting those days of getting keto going, and then, like I said, it was only 3 years later to film like introduced me to carnivore, which is effectively zero carb. That's what carnivore is. I mean, it's keto zero carb, so it's still keto. And I'm still in ketosis on carnivore.
Yeah. And wonderful. What a marvelous, marvelous story. Thank you so much for that. I know we are just bursting with questions here. Nancy, do you have a question for Erik?
Yeah, I'm very, very interested as a nutritional therapist in metabolic psychiatry. So I've been doing a little bit of training with Georgia Eid and then Denise Potter and Bruce Zupacania. I don't know if you know those two dietitians that are doing that as well, but they're doing.
I know Dr. Georgia Eid's read a book, doing her course on metabolic psychiatry. Do you think she left anything out?
Yeah, she's doing that course and that I did with her a few years ago. And the same with the two dietitians, Denise Potter and Beth Zupacania. And theirs is more keto for metabolic health, but that includes a carnivore diet too. But I'm trying, like I work with people, helping them with their nutritional issues and trying to get them healthy again through that. But I really, really believe in the metabolic approach, especially with mental health issues. And I've been, starting to work with a couple people, but what I've found is that they're on different drugs, different psychiatric drugs for depression, for anxiety, for, what do you call it? There's any number of things. And for me, when you're talking about you're doing deprescribing, that's an issue. Like we're sort of taught that we can, basically we're partnering with psychiatrists and the medical professionals. And I'm not sure if that's what you do. I mean, how do you do that?
I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a coach, and I work in collaboration. So my model is client-centered and collaborative. And that collaboration is, first of all, with the prescriber, because my client needs to go to the prescriber and they need to discuss with the prescriber that they are tapering the drug and to work through that, and then also to ask the prescriber to prescribe it in smaller doses or otherwise in liquid form if possible, so that we can microdose as we go down a hyperbolic taper. So they know that that's the right way to do it, because in case of SSRI, there's what we call a SERT, which is the serotonin transporter. It's the occupancy of the drug, of the transporter, that matters. And that works in a hyperbolic curve. So you could be on 100 milligrams and cut to 50, but your occupancy of the neuron may only go from 80% to 70%. So it's really only a 10% drop. But as you drop, you may end down on 10 milligrams and you drop to 9, but your occupancy may drop from 40% to 30%. So it gets far more sensitive the lower you go, So I work in collaboration with the prescribers, and I'm there to support the client. I'm there to coach them through the diet to coach them through their sticking to it, the pace we're going to go. And over time, one develops a feeling, and it's an art as well as a science. Is this a withdrawal symptom? And what a lot of psychiatrists do is they think it's a relapse. And you've got to tell the difference between they're relapsing to the original condition or whether it's a withdrawal symptom. And so I come to the model that I apply now, that I've worked out. I call it the 6 F's framework. And the first F is physical. So we need to become physically healthy, and that's where the metabolic diet comes in. Morning walks, morning sunlight, sunshine, all these things matter. But the main thing is what one's eating. And then the second F is called the pharmacology. And to then taper and get this person to slowly get the drug to leave the system. But the third F is feelings or psychology, because these drugs numb one, they numb your emotions. And as the drugs leave the system, so the emotions come up. And then I coach my clients how to handle those emotions, techniques for those. So there's all that going on. The prescriber only plays the role of the drug prescriptions, really, and also a member of the medical profession to monitor this, but they don't monitor it that closely. I encourage that my clients see the prescriber more often, than 6 months, hopefully every month. But all that process of going through, of taking their feelings, their physicality, the pharmacology, that's coaching.
Do you ever get the prescribers not wanting to cooperate, not believing in what you're doing, not wanting to titrate down on the drugs?
Oh, all the time. I mean, and not only that, I've got clients who go, I'm not going back to him. He destroyed my life.
Yeah.
I say, we've got to work with him. We've got to, we need to get a different prescription because I don't prescribe. And so I get resistance from the clients. And then in my own example is the first time I went off, I told you the psychiatrist shouted at me. And then the last time I came off my successful taper, I was with a different psychiatrist, and she said to me, if you come off this drug, you will die. So there was a total death threat. And in my family, my sister went cold turkey or Prozac, and she didn't make it. A week later, she was dead. So
it's my goodness, how awful!
It doesn't get more serious than this. The only thing that's more serious is people who've tapered cold turkey and ended up with a condition called akathisia, where you can't sit still, you can't sleep, you pace, and the suffering is so incredibly immense. And in fact, a well-known carnivore there is Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
And he's suffering from that because he followed medical advice and he was on benzodiazepines and, on and off and so on. And this gave him a sensitivity, believe it or not, to apple cider vinegar. So my sensitivity was to sugar. But what another hero in the struggle is Andreas Andersen, who wrote the book Crossing Zero. And he says, yes, he has clients. He's in Denmark. He has clients who end up being sensitive to the weirdest of things. And you're so incredibly sensitive, incredibly. So Jordan Peterson is still suffering. I mean, he's not touring anymore. And we really hope him a recovery. But recovery can take years. So it's vital that when somebody is coming off, that they taper under somebody who understands tapering. And the best qualification is to have been there, to have suffered through it, you understand. So when this person tells you something, you don't gaslight them. You say, I understand. I totally understand. I've been there. And you hold them and you create a safe space in the coaching way, and to let it and to let them discover that the healing lies within themselves, not in something external. And that is a big step. But also, you talk about the prescribers. You first of all have to recover from the drug. But the other thing my clients have to recover from is the diagnosis, the label that they've been given.
Yeah.
Oh, you're bipolar, or you're schizophrenic, or you are whatever. Extended grief disorder if you're too unhappy when your husband dies. Or my favorite is female anorgasmic disorder. So it's not he's a bad lover, it's that you have a psychiatric disorder for which, of course, there are tablets. And the DSM-5 just lists so many of these, hundreds of these disorders. So what I do is I don't see people as disordered. I believe a baby's born with a beautiful brain that's just right. And then something happens, as it does in life, all sorts of things. Either, even if we're talking just normal loving families, things can happen. I mean, I had a client, she was 3 and her husband was away. No, sorry, her father was away working, and her mother left to go spend a week with the father and left her with a caregiver. But she has this nightmare of seeing the mother's suitcases and this feeling of abandonment. So something happens, and all my clients, I just ask them, what happened? And every single one will tell me something happened. And then we work with that.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like I've been working with this guy now for, I think it's been working with him now well over 12 weeks at this stage, and he was the same as Jordan Peers. He came to me he was on a lot of benzos. He was really struggling with his mental health, and he was really deeply depressed. And I asked him the simple question. I said, listen, what are you doing? Like, you need to send me on your diet. You need to send me on what you're doing. Are you training or anything like that at the moment? Send me on everything. When I looked at his diet, it was absolutely horrendous. And I knew what I needed to do, but I knew I couldn't take him off the benzos too quickly. I knew I had to do it like gradually over time. And I knew I couldn't eliminate the carbohydrates because I had to keep the carbohydrates in there, because I've worked with people in the past with this issue. And the biggest factor was, you don't give these people too much fat. This can cause major problems. So I had to make sure I tapered the carbohydrates and the fats. So when he came down on the carbs, I increased the fats slowly. Now, we did that over a 10-week period. During that period, his mental fog was getting better and better. He was thinking better. He was able to function a lot better. Whereas when we spoke on day one on our conversation, it was like talking to a zombie. It was that bad, really bad. He couldn't even speak to me. And I was like, okay, you really need my help here, because you're literally been medicated up to your eyeballs. I know you are. And he wasn't just taking the benzo, he was taking every other medication. I think he was on around 16 tablets a day, something like that. And I was like, oh my God. And this guy was severely undereaten as well. He had no muscle mass in his body whatsoever. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of work that we need to do here. And I wanted to work with his doctor, but he wouldn't allow me to do it. I said, well, listen, I'm not letting you go. I know I can help you through this. You just need to trust me. And that's what we've been doing now. We're up to 12 weeks now. We've tapered down his medication massively. I think he's on around 6 pills at the moment. His benzos are half at the moment, and he's mentally more alert. It's unbelievable. He's able to function so much better. So it's incredible, absolutely incredible how people just don't understand this. And I'm also dealing with this now in my local community center, where we're dealing with an awful lot of ADHD kids and bipolars, and these kids are coming in, and you can clearly see what the problem is. And I'm trying to explain to the parents, like, listen, you've got to look at the child's diet. You've got to look at the child's diet, because these kids are coming in, they're aggressive, they're always giving out, they're pulling out their parents, and they're always hitting their parents. And I've heard stories that literally they're pulling TVs off the walls and they're putting their hands through the walls. And I'm like, listen, this can be solved, in my opinion, with just a little bit of care. And they're like, okay, well, I'll do whatever you ask. And I'm like, well, if I put you on a diet that you were probably told that could potentially harm your child, would you do it? And she was like, what do you mean? Well, I need to put your child on a high-fat diet. I've had parents come back to me and say, there's no way you're putting my child on a high-fat diet. This is how bad it is. And I'm like, listen, you don't understand. You are feeding your child way too much sugar. Way, way too much. I only had this conversation with Victoria a couple of weeks ago. A type 1 diabetic came in to see me a few weeks ago. And I explained to her mother, I said, listen, the child needs insulin. He doesn't need carbohydrates. And what we need to do is we need to phase the carbohydrates out slowly, because otherwise he's going to have issues down the line. And the biggest issue for me was when I looked at the child. The child was 97 kg, and he was only 8 years of age. 97 kgs. And everybody keeps on telling me that when it comes to type 1 diabetics, they don't gain weight. Absolute rubbish. Rubbish. This child was severely overweight. And it absolutely killed me when she walked out of the office and she was like, no, you're actually going to kill my child.
Huh.
I'll keep feeding them carbohydrates. And it's like what you do. Like, it's like, okay, well, I'm just a coach. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a doctor. But I can tell you right now, your doctor is going to fail you more than I'm going to do. I know I can help you, whereas he's going to medicate you for the rest of your life. And that's what's really, really frustrating for me at the moment, is that, because a lot of people will say, well, where's your qualifications? I'm like, well, hang on a second. I've got over 200 testimonials, well over 200 testimonials. Why can't we not listen to these people? Is this not the evidence that you need?
No, in a controversial view I have, it is that a large proportion of ADHD is not ADHD. And in fact, the very definition of it is why can't Johnny sit still at school? No, he has ADHD. How do we know he's got ADHD? Oh, he can't sit still at school. It's a circular reference. And it doesn't exist in its own. In other words, there's no test for it. There's no blood test. There's no scan. There's nothing for any psychiatric condition. So if Johnny in the morning had bacon and eggs for breakfast instead of Kellogg's Cocoa Pops with sugar on the top and Coke and whatever, he would feel totally different. His concentration would be there. And then he wouldn't be classed as ADHD. And what really scares me is the fact that they put on amphetamines. That's what Ritalin is.
Oh, my God.
It's an amphetamine, which is a street drug. I mean, it's just not in a tablet. So people say, but the kids tolerate it, they're okay. But they don't see my clients of 20 years old who hooked on these, and they don't think they can get through college without it. So they're stuck. And one of the most frightening things I hear from clients who've been on since they were children is, if I ask them the question, who are you? They can't answer. They'll say, I don't know who I am, because the personality never stabilized off the drugs. And it goes as far as some of them, I can ask them, where are you? Can't answer. Whereas if I ask you, Victoria, where are you now? You'll say, I'm sitting in my lounge in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a simple question. But because the sense of self has not been developed. So that's what I say is a recovery from the diagnosis. No, your brain is not damaged. You had an experience in life. You also had a toxic diet. Take these two together. Let's work through your experience. Let's change what you eat. Let's start you doing a nature walk once a week. Be amazed what effect that has. Just to go. I mean, I've got a river near where I live, and I walk there regularly. And the joy I get about seeing, the ducks have had babies. This is just it's a natural thing. And then you just feel joyous for the rest of the day.
Yes.
And you've had exercise. You're outside, there's no roof above you, you're not looking at a phone, and then we meet and we've got a wonderful organic restaurant near where I am, and then we'll have an organic steak or proper free range eggs and have that breakfast, and then of course we're not hungry for the rest of the day. Don't even think about food until the evening.
Yeah, makes all the difference.
I just want to add one part as well, because this is one thing I've noticed now in the last 2 years, especially with couples. I get couples coming on to me, and they're always like arguing, or they broke up, and I'm like, well, I just want to try something here. I want to look at the diet. I want to look at basically how we can actually fix this, because we might be able to salvage something here. And 9 times out of 10, it actually works. It works very, very well. Because I've had couples come to me separately, and they're like, no, I can never ever look at her ever again. I can never ever look at him ever again. And I'm like, well, what about if we just separate for a couple of days or for a couple of weeks, and I'm both going to put you on the carnivore diet, but I want you to stay away from each other for a while. All of a sudden, things are blossoming the way they should be. You know what I mean? The spark is getting back, and it's like you're feeding your body what it needs. So you're thinking a lot better. You're not as argumentative anymore. This is something I've noticed a lot, that when I walk out on the streets, everybody's just so aggressive now. There's just so much hate in the world now. And I know what the problem is. You can clearly see it. Look at what we're consuming. Everybody's just consuming crap nowadays. Caffeine, a lot of sugar. It's mind-boggling. And I always hear this in my local change rooms as well. People are hating each other. They're always going on about how they hate their partners. And I'm like, this is not good. We're literally feeding the brain the wrong food here. This is definitely having an impact on our mental health and how we actually approach things. And it has to have something to do with it, because you look at what's going on in the world now with transgender stuff as well. And it's like, is this all correlated? Am I just going mad here? Am I just seeing this differently to everybody else? Or is there something to this? What do you think about that, Erik?
What we do know is, first of all, that going zero carb can do no harm.
Mhm.
So when you say it helps 9 out of 10 people, well, it helps everybody. 9 out of 10 may be totally in remission and absolutely fine, and maybe 10% still not perfect, but it doesn't do them any harm. I mean, just small things like my clients also. I mean, they come to me for various reasons, but then they may go, "What's the matter?" No, my stomach's sore. And I go, "Oh, okay. Let's resolve your GERD, your heartburn. We sort that out." One of my clients had something called mastocytosis, which is mast cell disease, which is a horrible condition where you're basically allergic to your own sweat, so you can't sweat. He'd had 2 operations. They cut the nerves between his sweat glands and his skin, and nothing worked. And he's an opera singer, but he suffered from such bad reflux at night it would burn his vocal cords.
Oh,
And he was a quick fix, because I said to him, like you, Mark, as my average client, we go gently. We start cutting the carbs. We start introducing more healthy foods. But he said, "No, give me the solution." So I said, "Zero carb carnivore." He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means you go to the butcher and you buy yourself a whole week of steaks, and that's all you eat, and water. That's it." He said, "Done." And he did it. And in a week, he was cured. Had gone away. He's singing opera now.
wonderful.
I changed his life. He couldn't exercise because he couldn't sweat. And, it sort of, after that, I researched it and I discover the mechanism and so on. But the time it was, now he'd been on 3 medications, protein pump inhibitors, were supposed to decrease stomach acid, which is the wrong way. You actually suffer from too little stomach acid. And I know, I've got my sources there. Dr. Erik Peers on YouTube is the guru on that. That's where I learned about that. And then, of course, I'm my own guinea pig. I always experiment on myself over the years, over the many years. And occasionally, and alcohol is the culprit. I actually have no desire on carnivore, no desire to drink. But I was being the photographer at a wedding, and so they had this like red wine, bubbly red wine, but they'd left it in the freezer and it had turned into a slush puppy. So I was a bit bored. So I was eating this ice out of a cup, can you believe it or not? And then the funny thing happens to me is when I have alcohol, the part that you shouldn't eat carbs gets the first part that gets affected. So then I thought, no, he's eating the wedding cake. So then I tucked into the wedding cake. That night, it felt like there was a little man in my stomach with a blowtorch. The pain was excruciating. I couldn't believe it. This combination of alcohol and the carbs. So the alcohol, unfortunately, gives me a carb craving. And not only gives me the carb craving, but I'm of course subject to the alcohol. I'm intoxicated, and then it seems like a good idea. And vomiting in the shower later, as I tell myself, never again, never again. And I genuinely manage not to. It can be years in between before I have to teach myself the lesson again. It's a terrible lesson. It's a terrible lesson. So I've adopted the lifestyle. I used to run a Facebook group, and there's our South African Facebook group, a keto Facebook group, which now has 2.4 million members.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow.
And the lady is called Rita Fento. She is speaking with me at the World Nutrition Summit in October in Cape Town, and how she's maintained this over the 11 years. So then I stopped doing that. I think I did that a couple of years. But you've got to be dedicated, and Rita is. I prefer one-on-one. I do have groups, but I like the one-on-one interaction and helping somebody through their journey. She's able to handle 2.4 million and reach them and just do so much good. I mean, the before and after pictures, if you hadn't done it yourself, are just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, myself, I lost, I suppose, 50 pounds. But even better, I lost 50 pounds of fat, but I put on a minimum of 6 kilograms of muscle. That's just my rough calculation, maybe more muscle. Because I went down 20 kilograms in weight, but my clothes are fitting like they used to fit when I was much thinner. So that is it. And people talk about other supplements. I mean, I'm now, how old am I now? 68. And I started weight training 3-4 years ago now. And I can't believe it. My collar has gone out an inch and my clothes don't fit on my biceps anymore. So a measure where you can put on muscle at any age, you start feeling younger, your metabolism changes. You somehow, I don't crave junk food. I mean, the worst punishment, you make me eat crispy donut or something. That would be punishment. So this, one gets into this. But one of the challenges in this world is that it's so great. And I mean, sitting with the three of you, that's fine, we're all singing Kumbaya together.
Yeah,
but
really.
Explain that somebody out there who wakes up in the morning with fibromyalgia, with pain all over their body. I used to wake up in pain all over my skin, my muscles and my joints. And you tell them, no, it'll go away. All you got to do is, instead of steak and chips, eat steak. And how much? Well, as much as you want. And in fact, the story I tell is that you'll understand, is like my favorite godmother came to me in a dream and she said, you've got a wish. What is your wish? And I said, my wish is I could eat all my favorite fatty foods and lose weight and build muscle. And she said, there you go, keto, you've got it. So I eat as much as I want. I do not count calories. In fact, none of my clients, we don't count calories. And because I'm researching myself, when we were doing all these studies, we did, and we measured the calories. And sometimes it's amazing how low it goes in a day, of how few. And I think that measure is not an accurate measure, which leads me on to, let's just go back to so what I do with the client. So a client comes in. So the first thing I've got to do is help this client to become metabolically healthy. In order to do that, I take a baseline measurement. So I've got extensive blood tests. And I don't know if you've gone into them or not, but the thing I want to know is I don't want to only know fasting blood glucose, I want to know fasting insulin. Because blood glucose by itself doesn't mean much. I want to know how much insulin is your body secreting to keep your blood glucose at that level. So then I measure blood insulin, blood glucose. And then I explain this to my clients, which have never been explained to before. What does this mean? What does HOMA-IR mean? What does insulin resistance mean? So I go through that. I then look at liver function, because a lot could have non-alcoholic fatty liver or maybe alcoholic fatty liver disease. And so I've got a whole lot of tests I do. One I do is vitamin B12, because you can look like you've got Parkinson's and get the shakes just from low vitamin B12. And if they're not eating healthily, then of course they will have low vitamin B12. So you can do that. I've stopped people shaking. It's like a miracle. I mean, this is I've been doing this now. I've been doing this for 11 years. I've been studying diet for 30 to try and solve my own issues. But with clients, this is it. And when I discovered ketos, where I thought, okay, I know enough now to teach other people. So that's what I do. Then what I do is I put them on the CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. And that helps for them to see the graph, the readout of when I eat what happens to my blood glucose. So week 1, I don't change their diet at all. They go onto the CGM. They then see, oh, I had a pavlova. My blood sugar shot to 13. And it stayed there for 24 hours so they can see this. Then week 2 is I do gentle lower carb, just cutting it down a bit. And then they see they go low and stable. I also measure blood lipids, triglycerides and so on. Total cholesterol doesn't worry me at all, but it's there because my clients are scared of it and their doctors will tell them, oh, no, you can't eat that, it'll give you high cholesterol. And then I measure them again after 3 months just to show them that, look, it's fine. You know, your ratios are good. Then you go further than that. So I've got an app where I measure what they eat every day, exactly what they eat. They type it in. I monitor that daily. So then we're monitoring what they're eating, what the reaction is in their blood glucose, and then they keep a diary, a mood diary of what's happening, how they're feeling, what's going on. So then I've got all this data, and it's my ambition to do a PhD on this since I'm collecting this data, to see what is the connection between blood glucose, insulin, what you're eating, mood, psychiatric diagnosis. And then it gets compounded even further because we're doing the tapering. So we taper the drug, and then through all this together, we can say, okay, that's a withdrawal symptom. This is diet. That is, you got, what happened? You got a promotion at work. You know, that's a life change. You changed house. Mm-hmm. This is what's affecting you. It's nothing else. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. Mm-hmm. That's just a constant message that you're okay. You're okay. And then I see this. And on my website, I've got a couple of videos up of case studies. Unfortunately, I don't have too many because my high-level executive clients, they can't put out a video there of where they were.
Yeah.
Because I'm an executive coach first, is they need to keep this, you know, their persona at work. Yeah. And so they can't give me video testimonials. But I've got 2 ladies who are brave enough to do that. And the one, she's a business owner, small business owner. And I remember walking in, I wanted to go for a pedicure. And I don't know, I glanced down, she was wearing sandals and her ankles and her feet were swollen. So I said, what's this? No, she doesn't know, but she wants to close her business and she's depressed and she's on antidepressants. So I said, oh, but she'd seen me the year before. And she said, what happened to you? So I said, are you really interested? Because a lot of people I tell them, I do jiu-jitsu as a sport. And the kids come up to me and they go, how do you manage to do the sport? I said, no, I eat right. They go, no, how do you really do it? I said, no, it's I eat right. This is it. So I said to her, are you really interested? She said, yes. So I said, okay, this is what we do. And then she saw me weekly for a year. And her swollen ankles went away. Her business has boomed. She's optimistic. She's off the antidepressant. Her marriage is flourishing. And you can see the video. She's beautiful and she's lovely. And of course, she lost weight as well, just by the by. So this is a total life transformation. And to witness that is such a privilege that these people let me into their lives. And this is, to me, is the most meaningful thing I can do. And this is why I do this work. And this is why.
That's That's what I was going to say. Sorry for interrupting, Eric. That's what I was trying to say earlier on. That when you feed your body the right nutrition, everything else outside of that is just gets so much better.
Absolutely true. Yeah,
You know, I mean, everything around you. And I like the way you mentioned, like you're not broken. That this fight or flight situation that we all went through in the past, where we were under eating, we were restricting our food. This is all putting so much chronic stress in the body. It's unbelievable. And then you're going into the gym and you're under eating and then you're overtraining. It's just causing major problems.
Yeah,
Major problems. And I just want to add one more part, Victoria. Sorry. And this is why it's very, very important, because the one thing I look at now when I speak to a client is the one question I always ask is, okay, why are you here? And most of them will always say, well, I'm here to lose weight. And I'm like, well, how come you couldn't lose weight in the past? Why couldn't you not stick to a diet in the past? How is this diet going to be any different? And they're like, okay, well, I've heard a few videos you talking about how hunger's under control eating this way. And I'm like, okay, well, bingo. That's the reason why you're coming to see me. The reason why you could never stick to a diet, because you were always hungry. Now we need to tap into that. Now we need to understand, okay, why do you have to eat every 2 hours? Why are you constantly thinking about food every few hours? Because I would say about 95% of the women that come to me are getting ready to go on GLP-1, or they're getting ready to go abroad and do surgery. And I'm like, listen, okay, well, you have to give me at least 16 weeks. Before you even think about doing this, you need to just trust me and just do what I say, and let's see if we can do this ourselves. Within 2 weeks, they're getting back to me and saying, I don't even think about food anymore. The food noise is gone. I don't have these cravings anymore. I'm not looking at food now as calories anymore. I'm just looking at food as just fuel from my body, and that's it. And unlike you, Eric, at the very, very beginning, we're not even tracking calories at all during the whole process. But the whole point of the very, very beginning is to get the body fully healed. Now that can take 6, 8, 10 weeks. But once the body's fully healed, everything outside of that is a bonus. The weight comes off, your brain fog is gone, you're more mentally alert, you have so much more energy. Everything in your life just starts improving.
But Mark, you know that on carnivore, your GLP-1 goes up naturally.
Yeah.
It does anyway. So you don't have a Mounjaro deficiency. You do have a GLP-1
deficiency. That's a funny way to put it.
But it's that. And then we're nearing our time so quickly, Victoria. It's gone so fast. I just want to come back to your question about why I call myself a deprescriber. That's because this has now become the official term. It's the process you're going through coming off drugs that have been described. Mm-hmm. But where I face the challenge is I find taking people off psychotropic totally is a multidisciplinary approach. And medicine is divided up into special silos of information. So you get passed from one specialist to the other. I mean, psychiatrists are not trained in diet or exercise. Mm-hmm. And people's lives are devastated on these drugs. They financially they have a problem. So what I've done is qualified myself in various aspects. So I'm an executive coach with Ennis University in the UK. I'm a health coach with Health Coaches Academy in the UK. And then I'm a metabolic health coach with Nutrition Network. Mm-hmm. And I have a psychology degree, but you need to piece this all together. And then, of course, 30 years in business to understand. So if I have an executive and I'm working with him or her, I understand their stresses, they're traveling and they're not seeing family. You know, we can work together. We find something that works. You know, how to handle airline food, all these sort of things. And diet is core to it. And carnivore, or if people really want their veggies, we do low-carb veggies as long as they're going to ketosis. So that's the main thing is ketosis. You've got ketones going through your brain that's what matters more than carnivore. Carnivore works for me because I don't get sore joints anymore. And I also find it easier because I don't have that food noise anymore. So that's why it's carnivore. But if somebody doesn't have that addiction to vegetables like I have, and they can eat low-carb veggies, then it's absolutely fine. It's not an ideology. It's something that works. So what do you call myself? So I call myself, I'm the executive coach, which I am. And then I just say I'm a metabolic, which means metabolism, which means low-carb, carnivore, metabolic deprescribing specialist, because that's what I do. So my reading matter varies from psychiatry on the one hand to coaching to psychology to exercise, but I've lived a lot of it myself. I mean, as we age, life doesn't get easier, and we need to actually exercise more. We need to eat more protein. We can't handle junk food like we used to. Life can be just as great, but you can't abuse your body and your mind like you used to.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Very true.
that is where my title comes in.
Wow. Thank you for explaining all that. It's an excellent approach. Nancy, do you have something for us? Question? Nancy, I can't hear you.
Yeah, she's our
Unmute.
unmute there.
Sorry,
There you
my
go.
dogs were barking. Mark was mentioning the GLP-1s that people want to go on. I've encountered quite a few people who are already on them. How have you had people on them that you like? Could they come off like through the diet, or how did you sort of handle that if you did encounter that?
The first thing is like anything, you've got to give the why, because if people don't have the why, they're not going to do it. People aren't going to do what you tell them, and this is very much the coaching positive psychology approach. In that, none of these decisions are mine. We'll come back to deprescribing. The tapering is never my decision. It's always my client's decision. I inform my client, but everything is their decision, totally. So when we start, so I've got my 6 Fs, and I say to them, where do you want to start? It's their decision. And that makes sense, because they know what's most important to them. And what I never want to become is like the medical model where we think we know better.
Yeah.
And of course, we're all enthusiastic about carnivore, but it would be a mistake to say, I know better, you must go carnivore. No, it's what's right for you now. Where are you? So what do you want to talk about today? And so one of my clients said she's fighting with her sister. So I said, okay, let's talk about that. Let's resolve that, because there's no way you're going to cut down on your carbohydrate while you're in tears about your sister. You're going to grab a tub of ice cream. So we deal with that. And then some others have had they're overwhelmed just with life. So then we do some coaching on that. And then we get to a position where I say, fine, what do you want to do next? And they say, no, well, let's look at the diet. Then I say, fine. And it comes from them. They're ready. And then we go through that process. And then they'll say, actually, I don't think my medication's adding anything. I'd like to cut on that. And then we go through that. Or if somebody's about to go bankrupt, I need to work on their finances. We need to do that, because that's the most pressing thing. And so in the 6 Fs, we're basically taking life and where do we want to go on this journey, looking at everything. But Nancy, you asked about GLP-1. Yes, I get clients on GLP-1. The first thing is I don't oppose it. I say it's fantastic. Yes, GLP-1 takes away the food noise, which means you naturally start eating less, but you've got to stop your drug someday. Mm-hmm. And when you stop it, unless you've adjusted to a healthy diet, you're going to put the weight back on again. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's going to be even worse, because as you lose weight, especially on a GLP-1 agonist, if you're not doing weight training, you're not eating enough protein, you're going to lose muscle. So their weight loss is fat and muscle. But when they put the weight back on again, they only put fat on. Mark, I'm sure you see this every day. And so they end up being what we call skinny fat, which is terribly unhealthy. So in that's the why. And then I say to them, fine. So let's take you into ketosis. Let's increase your GLP-1 naturally. Let's start decreasing your diet. And then they'll say, that's fantastic. I've cut my dose in half and I still don't have the food noise. I'm sure you're familiar with food noise. It's big. It's when the ice cream talks to you. And I used to have it when you go Temptation Alley, when you go to the supermarket and they have all those chocolates lined up and so on. And they used to talk to me like Alice in Wonderland, say, eat me, eat me.
Yeah.
But it's
And-
amazing. Sorry, but it's amazing because they're coming out. I mean, this food noise has been coming out now for what, the last 15 years, but it's been here for like a long, long time. It's just called food addiction. I always say this to people, okay, this is nothing new. This food noise that we're hearing at the moment is nothing new. We all have addiction to food. That's what's going on here. And when people are saying like, well, I'm not addicted to carbohydrates, I'm like, okay, go 3 or 4 days without eating any carbohydrates or sugars, and you let me know how you get on. More than likely, more people get back to me after 2 days and they're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, okay, well, there's the issue right there. Now you understand you were addicted to food. Whereas if you were eating ground beef or steaks or anything like that, you would not be addicted to these foods because you wouldn't be eating as much as you think. You'd be only eating once or twice a day, and that's it. When your body's hungry. So it's
and
like,
then,
yeah. Sorry,
yeah, and then when I'm carnivore, I can go through Temptation Alley and they don't talk to me. And it took me quite a while where I could actually look at them and say, now you're quiet now, aren't you? You know, you're in my life for so many years.
Exactly, yeah.
And stomach ache and made me fat and cost me money. And now it's like you're not there. And I just see them that they're non-food. It's just non-food, you know, it could be pebbles or something there. And it's such a wonderful freedom. So there's this interlocking between diet and psychology. You know, I've now got freedom because my thoughts are different to what my thoughts were. So that's why I cross the boundaries between physiology, psychology, psychiatry, nutrition, exercise. It's one person, and we need to deal with that person as a whole being. And this is where I come in with you know, what I call myself. If I add the other words, it'll be too long, and then my marketing advisors will say, no, that won't work. So this is where we are.
And I love the way you mentioned that, because I think this is very, very important, that not everybody's the same, and you have to treat the person as an individual. Like, everybody goes through trauma in their life. Everybody's going to go through different experiences in their life. And it sounds to me, Erik, that your sessions are more therapy based, which is very, very similar to mine. I love having these conversations with these clients. I love getting into the mind, understanding why things are going on, why they're struggling. It's not just the nutrition, it's not just the training. There's something else going on. It could be a breakup. It could be it could be like something's going on in work. There's something going on in the background that we need to fix. And more than likely, once we address that issue, everything else gets so much easier. And I find that all that external stuff is going to be there regardless. What goes on in work with your partner, all that's going to be there no matter what. But the one thing you will always have control of is, what do I put into my body? If I'm able to put the right food into my body, the gut-brain connection will kick in. I'm thinking a lot better. I'm able to focus a lot better, and I might be able to control that situation a lot easier than going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Erik, we've had such a marvelous conversation with you, and we want to be respectful of your time. I'm sure that our audience is anxious to find out more about you. Could you please give us a little overview of how people can get in touch with you?
It's quite simple. It's my website, which is my name, Erik with a K. So it's ERIKPEERS.com. And on the website, there's a lovely little button. You can go schedule a free 20-minute call. And I like talking to people. So just schedule a call with me. We have a 20-minute call, and we just see where it goes. And maybe we just swap notes, or maybe I'll point you to some self-help sites, or maybe you'd like to become a client. And that's it. So it's erikpeers.com.
Wow, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with, some words of wisdom?
The words of wisdom is that your support group is very important. So, I mean, today, we're 4 carnivores, and this is fantastic. I don't just spend half the time about that. I can just feel the support from everyone. We all have the same values, generally in life. We want to help people. And so the wisdom is that support. So the fifth F in my model is family and friends. They are very important in your total healing.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Thank you
It's
very
been an
much.
absolute pleasure, Erik, having you on. Thanks very much for coming on and doing this podcast with us.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you so much. This is
Thank
great. Very enlightening.
Yeah,
All
very
right, people. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.